We use something called the pyramid principle, which is a principle made famous by McKinsey. It's, again, very much rooted in common sense. The idea is, before you start your presentation, don't even open PowerPoint. If you have a pen and paper, awesome. Do it with a pen and paper. If you want to do it on a Word document, that's fine as well, right? But let's say you are thinking about your next quarterly earnings or thinking about your next conference presentation, just jot down those 5 or 6 things you want to communicate. At the end of that presentation, 5 or 6 things you want to communicate. That becomes your main message, main idea. And then you start figuring out how to create, what are the points that will support your 5 or 6, whatever your main message is. In some cases, you might group these, right, into logical groupings, and then you order them. Now, this might look a little complicated, but let's just look at some examples and it'll get clear. I believe for investor presentations, things can be very, very simple. We have looked at, I would say, dozens of decks, right? Conference decks, investor day decks, overview decks. I would say 7 out of 10 decks fall under this structure. You will have some main messages up front. For an overview deck, you might want to say, we have a great strategy in place. We are living up to our commitments. We know the future. Here's how we'll get there. But most of the decks, right, what I've seen is you can split them into 2 sections. One is a business section. One is a finance section. Typically, I see CEOs presenting the business section, right, and CFOs presenting the finance section. If it's a large company with multiple business unit heads, those business unit heads could be presenting this section. But if you are thinking about your next, overview presentation or conference presentation, I would say just start here. Split it into 2 big sections, if you think of, and then within each, right, start thinking about what you want to convey. A lot of times companies are just focusing on 3 or 4 big pillars of their strategy and communicating that. Sometimes companies are breaking their business part, right, by business unit, right? What's the macro looking like? What does the competition look like? What are we doing? What are our goals? And then the finance portion, right? Again, I've seen it's always like start with the top line revenue, go to the EPS or bottom line or margin, depending on your business model, right? Some companies will say, how are we spending our CapEx? What are we doing with our bottom line, right? We are giving away dividends, we are doing M&As, and then always, right, you're giving guidance. Quarterly earnings slides, again, very similar. Have your main message, break it into 2 sections, business update. These are just examples, but typically business update should be non-GAAP. What's happening in the business that's positive, right? Hey, we got a new client, we have some new product launches, we have some cost initiatives, and then the finance section is, again, similar. Top line, bottom line, other metrics, and guidance. Thought I'll share a couple examples. This is exactly how, like, this company, right? This was part of a conference presentation, and this is their business section, right? This is their strategy. There are 4 pillars to their strategy. And then you talk about each of the pillars, and this is how the slides are arranged, 1, 2, 3, 4, go to the next strategy, double click on it, next strategy, double click on it. So very actionable. You can totally apply this, in your next presentation.